October 4th, 1957, Sputnik. What did it mean? What does it mean today? Sputnik, 1957. Are you a member of the silent generation, sir?
Yes, sir.
Would you tell me what Sputnik meant to you?
It meant a lot of excitement, and then all over and everyone I knew was excited about it.
Were you afraid of Sputnik? Did it create fear?
No, it didn't create fear.
No?
No.
How about a member of the boomer generation? Thank you. A boomer. Who's a baby boomer? You a baby boomer? What did Sputnik mean to you?
It looked like a baby boomer. Sputnik was something we used to run out in the yard and watch it pass overhead every so many hours. It also meant that we'd left Earth, and it was an obvious sign that you could see it happening all the time.
So you could see it in the sky.
The new world. And
Do you know why it beeped?
why?
Well, the Russians created Sputnik, and they made sure it emitted a signal so that radio, people who were into radio hobbyists, could essentially pick it up as it traveled around the world. Does anybody else have a story about Sputnik? I was at the Tech Path program yesterday. And you have a Sputnik story?
I do, actually.
Good.
Actually, to date me, Sputnik was one of my very first experiences, because when Sputnik went up and it went around the first time, I am told by my parents, somehow I don't remember it, that I was carried out into the yard to look at Sputnik in their arms when I was about that big.
Right.
It was that significant. Everybody wanted to see it. Everybody knew about it. It was pervasive.
Well, Sputnik struck fear in the heart of Americans. It meant that the Russians had achieved something that we had not yet achieved. And as a result, as I was told yesterday at Tech Path, there was a guy there who said, well, when I was in first and second grade, I was pounded with math and science, because Sputnik meant to American education that we had some catching up to do. And as a result, groups like ARPA, what is today DARPA, the Defense Appropriations Research Project Agency, which is credited with creating the internet, were stood up to help accelerate the development of science and technology in America. And a big part of that was changes in our education system to focus more on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, so that we could effectively compete with the Russians and ultimately win the space race, which actually culminated in the fall of the Berlin Wall in the 1990s. So Sputnik was sort of a landmark, a milestone that we can look back on. It doesn't mean much to us today. But what I would like to suggest to you is that we essentially have a new Sputnik. And I'm going to help you understand that symbol that says, America, we must rise up. We must be more innovative. We must be more creative. And we must be better at science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and in the integration of the arts with science, technology, engineering, and mathematics to achieve innovation. If I ask you, and you can just do this sort of along with me, just think about it, what are the things driving change in education? What is the most compelling series of things happening today in the world that's causing us to focus, for example, on science, technology, engineering, and math, or educational reform? The internet? China. Competition, global competition. Any other ideas? What was that? The environment? You mean like the possibility that we could damage the planet to the point that maybe it would not sustain human life someday? Environmental degradation. Well, Thomas Friedman, you're familiar with him, many of you I'm sure. The World is Flat really provides a good framework to understand what's happening. And if you think of this as a system of forces or a convergence of forces, what's happening essentially is globalization, the intersection of globalization, changes in demography, and the accelerating rate of science and technology. These three things are coming together, and where they meet in the middle is our Sputnik. Let me explain further. Globalization is essentially the ability to communicate in the world, to reach around the world through the internet, through voice communications or video communication or email, and sort of flatten the world. Francis Cairncross, the economist, said it in the 1990s, the elimination of distance and cost as a measure of communication will change the world. So as we're able to sort of communicate globally in the world, and transportation costs, relative transportation costs have come down, the ability to move goods around the world, and also the ability to move our jobs, move production, distribute production around the world, so that essentially American companies can manufacture in other countries. And now we get the rise of competition, a flat world, a world where anyone can participate. If we think about globalization, we tend to think about countries like China or India, even Russia and the European Union, as representing a threat to the United States. And this is often measured in terms of wages and the ability for jobs to be outsourced overseas. For example, you may know that video game companies are turning up production and film companies are doing post-production in other countries because it lowers their cost. But there's a little bit more to the story. We are also concerned with these other countries' ability to outproduce, in terms of quantity, the numbers of scientists, technologists, engineers, and mathematicians. So our concern is that these other countries are outproducing in numbers the numbers that we can produce. And this is sort of the Sputnik effect. We must rise up and compete with these other countries. What you need to know is that the population in China is so large that they have as many honor students as we have students. And we will never, ever compete with India or China on raw numbers. The American differentiation in the past in terms of our economy and today comes from our ability to do what? To innovate, to think creatively, to think outside of the box, or perhaps to even see entirely new boxes where people don't see problems at all. So it's our ability to innovate that makes us American. And what I would like to suggest to you and show you throughout this program today is that a focus on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics and education without the arts robs us of critical innovation skills. Demography. There's a lot happening in the world in terms of demography. One key point as Americans that we should understand is that 40% of the American workforce is expected to retire by the year 2015. And this started about 2 years ago. Now, boomers will either retire or stay in the workforce longer, but they will undoubtedly significantly restructure their work patterns. And as a result of boomers beginning to retire today and the projected retirement or restructuring of work by 2015, we have an interesting problem. And it is the ability to replace the wisdom and knowledge of the boomers in the workforce. So add globalization to demography, and finally science and technology. Ray Kurzweil, the American inventor, has said that essentially we're seeing a paradigm shift every decade or so now, a doubling of science and technology progress and knowledge every 10 years. According to his analysis, we will see as much new science and technology progress between the years 2001 and 2026 as in the past 100 years. Imagine all of the things that have happened in the past 100 years. Nuclear power, space flight, the human genome, fiber optics. All of these things happened in the past century, and Kurzweil is saying that we'll see it not only in our lifetime, but by the year 2026. He says further that in the next 100 years, we will see as much new science and technology progress as in all of human civilization. That's difficult to fathom. But what I'd like to do today, in the first section of my speech about technology, is show you how some of Kurzweil's 100 years of science and technology progress between 2001 and 2026 is in fact very real today. We can see it, we can touch it, and much of it, in what I focus on, will essentially be related to your industry, the film and new media and television industries, as well as others. So is the issue science, technology, engineering, and mathematics? The issues, as someone pointed out earlier, of the 21st century are war, environmental degradation, poverty, starvation. These are the issues, not only for the world, these are the issues of our communities: drug abuse, dropout, people in jail. These are the challenges that we struggle with in the 21st century. Issues of equity. The issues of competitiveness of our military, of our companies, of our students, and of our workers relate intimately to these other issues. But we should be drawing a bigger box if we're going to create boxes than focusing on science, technology, engineering, and math. We should get the issues in our sights if we're going to focus our dollars on trying to essentially outproduce these other countries in terms of innovation. The objective, ladies and gentlemen, as I said earlier, is creating the capacity for innovation. There are a number of books out on this. I understand Tom Peters has a new book out on it, and there's a book called The Whole New Brain from Daniel Pink that talks about a left brain, right brain kind of balance and creating a person that's both an artist and a technologist, an artist and a technician, and that is the key to innovation. So we must shift in terms of our education system from thinking about STEM capacity, science, technology, engineering, and math, to thinking about the capacity for innovation. Put a different way, we need to think about connecting heads and hands. We need to think about creating thinkers and doers. It's not enough anymore to essentially produce people from an education system who have mastered knowledge. We must marry knowledge with skill. And the key requirement to connect knowledge and skill is essentially the movement of technology, or more specifically computers, into almost all domains of human endeavor. Computers and networks are the fabric of the 21st century. The car that you drove here tonight has as much computer power as was used to put man on the moon. Do you think every time you get behind the wheel of your car that you're driving a spaceship, or as much power as a spaceship? Why do you not send your car to the guy down the road or around the block to fix it anymore? Do the people who work on automobiles, are they still mechanics, or are they something more? These are some of the questions that we'll deal with in a very holistic way. I would submit to you that the opportunity for Central Florida, although you've made much progress, and I'll tell you how you compare against other emerging technopoly in the world, that your focus and your key differentiator and your key lead today in economic development, education, and employment, as Lucia pointed out, is creating Da Vinci minds. People who are whole brain thinkers, people who are whole people who can do as well as think. So the program is organized into technology, emerging technopoly, jobs, and education. In the technology analysis, what I hope to show you is that the future is in fact here. That things that we used to dream about, imagine, and think about at Disney and in science fiction films are in fact very, very, very real today. Now that's not all promise that science fiction and technology has come to fulfill this imagination. There's much to think about and criticize in terms of technology, and so we shouldn't be just swayed toward what's sexy or what's appealing in technology. But what I like to do is show you what's happening and how technology is very futuristic in science fiction like today. Second, in the emerging technopoly section, a technopoly or a technopolis is essentially a high technology region, a region that is focused on high technology as a key competitiveness differentiator on the world stage. A technopoly would be a place like Silicon Valley or Research Triangle or Austin, Texas. Does it surprise you that the Central Florida I-4 corridor has been selected as an emerging technopolis, a place that essentially could be someday the wealth creator that Silicon Valley was many, many years ago, and it still is today. I'll tell you about the other emerging technopoly and specifically focus on the Central Florida I-4 corridor and why we selected that region. Second, I'd like to talk about jobs, the changing nature of technology in jobs, and what kinds of opportunities are available to young people who are graduating from high school and looking at their college future and making selections about what kinds of jobs they might want to enter. And specifically, I will show you how technology has invaded almost every aspect of jobs, from Burger King to manufacturing to bioscience to nanotechnology to film, video, and other interactive media. And finally, I would like to talk about education. You know, Plato said it a long time ago. He said that essentially the republic was dependent on education, the ability of one generation to carry forward what another generation had amassed, that each generation successively was dependent on education. All of these problems, environmental degradation, poverty, war, the issues of low economic wages that you'd like to raise in a given region, are all dependent on education. Education is the absolute key. So let's get started. Welcome change. Are you surprised that I would start with a PS3 or a video game when I talk about what's happening in the world of technology? Many of you are saying, no, I'm not surprised at all. Did you know that a PS3 or an Xbox today operates at 1 teraflop per second? In 1993, the Supercomputer Association set out an initiative to create a single computer that operated at a teraflop in 1993. In 1994, Daniel Kay, who's now here in Florida, responded by saying our company, Thinking Machines, can take commercial off-the-shelf components and build a teraflop supercomputer for $100 million. Your Xboxes and PS3s have as much computer power as was used to solve the human genome. Do you think that there might be a more constructive application of video games than our current entertainment uses? That's a lot of raw computing power. Serious Games. Someone earlier said that they were part of a serious games company, a company projecting the commercial off-the-shelf video game technologies, both production tools and things like a PS3 or an Xbox, into purposes other than entertainment, into healthcare, into education, into social justice applications, into recruiting people into different fields of work. These are all relatively new applications of video games. You see, what many of us miss is that video games are not content. Lucia, video games are not content. These platforms are a medium and therefore on the same level as television and radio, but differentiated by their interactivity. See, a medium can send a signal, receive a signal, and store a signal. Not only are video games a medium, but they're differentiated from past forms of mass media because they are interactive. That interactivity is the key. Supercomputers for the masses. So the question for Central Florida is, what will we do? What content will we create to push down the pipes of the internet to land on this new medium called a video game console? It was said that these sorts of games would be the Trojan horse to open up video distribution and audio distribution and home banking. It's yet to happen. It's yet to happen. But all of these technologies are in place today, waiting for these new applications. Video games. Flight Simulator 10. What we're looking at when we look at video games today is very different than what I looked at as video games, Space Invaders and Defender and Centipede, right? Now I'm dating myself a little bit. Video games today approximate photorealism. So they're differentiated in that essentially what you have are high fidelity visual environments that approximate reality. Secondarily, many video games today have an underlying simulation or mathematical model of the world. What does a simulation give us the ability to do? Well, in one case, it gives us procedural fidelity. So if in Flight Simulator 10 we decide to pick a 777, the cockpit and the instrumentation look and behave very much like a 777 Boeing would actually behave. That procedural fidelity is what is opening up an entirely new generation of educational technology, referred to earlier as serious games in one case. This is a serious game that I helped create at the DMC, the Digital Media Collaboratory at the University of Texas at Austin. This is actually a map of Iraq, a task organization for a tactical operations center, the battle captain, an Army battle captain. This is the radio, and each one of these computers represent Army battle command systems. We created a video game to teach battle commanders to make better decisions, because much of the training that they were getting, we looked at, was focused on what they called buttonology. What sequence of buttons do I push to get to the map? Not when do I call up the map and when do I look at the 3 different rehearsal scenarios so that I can pick what we're going to do in a tactical operation. A serious game. A game used for a purpose other than entertainment. This is a triage game developed by RTI International. In fact, the U.S. government has invested over $45 million in triage training-based games. They're now porting these games to Homeland Security and civilian use for Homeland Security. This is Rotterdam, the Netherlands. VSTEP essentially modeled the entire city inside of a video game so that Homeland Security training across fire, police, ambulance, and other services could collaborate and practice scenarios and drills. So a game quiz. Let's see how much we know about games. I'm sure you guys are going to get all of these answers. What is the average age of video gamers in the United States? Okay, who thinks it's 12 or younger? Okay, and who thinks it's 13 to 25? Okay, and who thinks it's 26 to 32? You're right. So about half got it wrong and half got it right. The average age of video gamers in the United States is 30 years old. What does this tell us about video gamers? Video game play is a multi-generational phenomenon. Many of the kids coming into the education system today are products of parents who are video gamers. Notice that 19% of video gamers are 50+ years old and represent actually the fastest growing population of video game players in America. Now realize that we count, Yahoo games such as bridge or backgammon in these kinds of games. Now let's take a different cut at it. What do you think the percentages are if you look at male versus female online gamers? Who thinks males are more dominant? Well, actually, online, it's 56%, 44%, and if you notice the byline, women over the age of 18 represent a greater portion of the game-playing population than boys ages 6 to 17. Now, my mom says this is just not that hard to figure out. It's not true, she says. Women do like to hunt. They just like to run in packs and to kill with a really good reason. She did say that. Video games. Game Boys. Game Boy? How about a health and medical device to enhance the health of young people? This is a blood glucose test meter that's been plugged into a Game Boy, and it's actually a video game that runs on blood. So you take your diabetes test here, and your game character's health is derivative of your compliance to your blood glucose test level. I was just on the phone last week with the University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston. They want to create a series of casual games that you play on your cell phone, and your cell phone will actually act as a pedometer, so that when you walk around, it'll count the number of steps you take, record your heart rate, okay, and allow you to take blood pressure tests on your cell phone, relay the data back to your doctor, and give you the historical information, essentially to manage your own health. But they want to create casual games on top of your actual health data that work the same way, where your health in the game is a function of how much exercise you get. There's a whole new world of possibility from the technologies that we hold in our pockets today if we just open up the way we think about it. This looks like a weapon system. I was actually here in Orlando at the ITSEC military training conference, and what you see here is a guy looking into a weapon, but when he looks in, what does he see? America's Army, the video game. Pull the trigger, the rocket launches inside of the video game. Real-world instrumentation connected to video games give us the power of simulation. Games, on the other hand, which are very different than simulation, give us goals, give us win states, give us something called score, a form of assessment, give us the ability to compete, give us the ability to cooperate, and effectively engage learners by motivating them to learn. Jan Cannon Bowers at the University of Central Florida says that what's happening in the world today, demonstrated by this technology actually, is a merging or convergence of realities. A merging of physical reality, virtual reality, and imaginary reality. Physical reality is, of course, the reality that we share here today. Now, virtual reality, on the other hand, would be a reconstruction of something that exists in the physical world, like a building or this room. And imaginary reality would be sort of throwing Mickey Mouse into the virtual representation. So something that does not exist in the physical or virtual worlds is considered imaginary. Where do you think is the key place in the United States that practices this merging of realities? Disney. Have you been on the Mummy ride? Go to Disney next time and look and pick it apart. Where's the physical, where's the virtual, where's the imaginary? All of their new rides sort of blend all of this together so that it really creates a kind of new perspective. A key point about the echo boom generation, or children born between 1977 and today, is that this generation may in fact see the world, all of these realities, as sort of one reality, whereas we make a distinction between the three. A shift in worldview, very similar to the boomers who came up through television, and the cognitive scientists started running off saying, what are the impacts of television on cognition, higher order thinking? We're asking those questions today. Video games belong in the curriculum across just about every research discipline in the university. There are philosophical questions. There are sociological questions. There are questions of economics. There are questions of how we can use the technology in education. There are mathematical problems. There are computer science problems. But when you say games in the academy, what do most universities say? They have no place in formal education. Is that true in Central Florida? No. This is one of the reasons that I believe that you are different. You are relatively special compared to many other places in the world. Just the other day, on March 24th, the Army's RDECOM put up $75 million for the research into the application of video games to soldier preparedness and readiness. $75 million. Meanwhile, universities that are much larger than the University of Central Florida, under the guidance of people like Vice Admiral Al Harms, retired from the Navy, now heading up research and development there, do not even have game construction curriculum in their computer science and their media departments, much less in the other departments. At the University of Central Florida, Jan Cannon Bowers and Vice Admiral Al Harms are working on issues like how do you rehabilitate cognitive skills for soldiers that have hit their head against their Humvees when they were hit by an IED? How do you handle physical rehabilitation using video games so that soldiers who come back and are missing limbs or are crippled as a result of their injuries in the Iraq War can essentially walk, talk, and fit into society again? Video games, serious issues. This intersection of realities can be seen here in this screen. This is actually Otronicon. If you've been here to the Orlando Science Center when they host the Otronicon events, I came to the first one, and they had this screen that was actually on the floor. And above was a projector, and when it projected down on the floor, it would sort of change out every minute or so. So 1 minute it would be a pond of goldfish, and the next minute it would be kids running across the screen kicking the ball. Do you see the intersection? Here's the x-axis, here's the y-axis. This is imaginary reality, this is physical reality. This is the world our children are growing up in. This is the world that we have to make sense of as outsiders. And where is all this heading? People always say, Jim, you must know the next big thing. So let's get back to the cell phone. If you take a cell phone, how many of you have cell phones with video cameras in them? Right? Almost everybody. The future just caught you. You are carrying the future in your pocket right now. Hold up a cell phone. This is Nokia research. They're in New York, an MIT Nokia partnership. Hold up the cell phone, turn on the video camera, and you see the little red box? It's recognizing different things from the video. Press your mouse key, highlight the Empire State Building, click and see a menu. Maybe one of the items is trivia, movies, King Kong. And as you hold your cell phone up, King Kong, an animated character, will climb up and down the Empire State Building. You're holding the future in your pocket, and the window of development is probably 2 to 3 years. Imagine kids playing video games where they straddle the virtual world and the physical world, and they're looking around corners, shooting each other in schools with their cell phones. So let's shift gears a little bit. What do you think this is? Is anybody in the health industry here? Well, it's my daughter, of course. And she's about 3 years old now, but when she was less than an hour old, she was issued her very first computer. But it's more than a computer. It's sort of a low jack for babies, right? This is a device so that if the baby's removed from the nursery by anyone other than a parent, a nurse, or a doctor, an alarm sounds at the nursing station. Another interesting part of this is it's a geolocation device. So not only is alarm sound, but now you can see where the baby is anywhere in the hospital compared to a hospital schematic. If you go to an elevator and you hit the button, you're trying to get the baby out of the hospital, the elevator won't stop. If you go to a door to go out a back stairwell, it locks. Okay, what are we talking about now? Security. How about distributed robotics? Distributed control. Distributing sensing and actuation. This is what I call a fourth generation computer. First generation computers are mainframes, second generation computers are mini computers, third generation computers are PCs, and many of the cell phones that we hold today are just old 486 computers running over a network using something called a three-tiered architecture, client-server computing architecture. Third generation. Fourth generation computers are very small. This is 11.7 millimeters cubed. This one's half the size. These are from Berkeley Labs. This is a solar panel, so you don't plug it in. This is the computer chip, and this little green area here is the wireless device for two-way communication. What do you use things like this for? Well, how about a laboratory and a pill? Instead of drawing blood, sending it down the hallway, why don't we just eat the laboratory and let it beam out the diagnostics through radio waves? This laboratory and a pill is currently being tested in the United Kingdom. So we can shrink the entire laboratory down to the size of a pill. What makes a fourth generation computer a fourth generation computer is it is a system on a chip. Third generation computers are componentized. You can switch out memory and processor and hard drive. With these, they're essentially a system. Saturn, Apollo, the car you drove in today. How many of you have a hybrid vehicle? Nobody? I get 47 miles a gallon. And you can buy a modification of this vehicle and get 100 miles per gallon. Today. Science fiction-like technology today. MIT is currently working on an automobile that they plan will go 300 miles per gallon. Silicon Valley has now gone into the automotive race because innovation has become stagnant in the American automotive industry. The biggest growing area of the automotive, the fastest growing segment of the automotive industry, does anybody know what it is? Telematics. In-vehicle new media. I mean, it's popping. It's been going on 5 years, and it's hot right now. Running shoe, robot shoe. Running shoe, robot shoe. Running shoe, robot shoe. This is the Adidas One running shoe. You can buy one for basketball now. They're about $160. Embedded in the shoe is a sensor, a microcontroller, and a motor. The shoe actually changes its shape to adapt to the runner and the environment in real time. When you have this package, sensor, actuator, computer, software, you have a robot. Your car is a robot. The plane that you get in to fly to on vacation is a robot. The heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system that's controlling the temperature in this room is a distributed robotic system. Your wash machine is a robot. Your dryer is a robot. Your DVD player is a robot. Robots are everywhere and have become fundamental to society in the 21st century, yet we do not see through the technology for what it is. We just accept it at face value. The cochlear ear implant. A small microarray is actually plugged into the inner ear. This is a small actuator, a sensor, an actuator, a computer, and software. The marriage of man or woman and machine. A new level of human systems integration. This is the world that we live in today. Now, every example that I've shown you so far actually exists. And I actually can do 2 hours of these. But this example is a design for the future. So let me show you where Kurzweil's rate of science and technology progress is taking us. This is a robotic red blood cell, the design or concept for a robotic red blood cell. Theoretically, if you had a half a liter of these in your blood, you could sit at the bottom of a swimming pool without taking a single breath of ambient air for 4 hours. This is the kind of technology that we're envisioning and prototyping and trying to create in our laboratories today. And the ability to create these technologies depend on a discipline that's really important in Central Florida. It's called modeling and simulation. Modeling and simulation is the cornerstone of 21st century science and technology. We've reached a world, according to the National Science Foundation, where we have a new architecture from which to create products from. And the architecture is genes, atoms, bits, and neurons. Genes, ATCG, the code of life. We can now raise pigs that have human blood, or actually, what's it called? The oxygenated part of blood, I'm missing it, sorry. What's it called? Hemoglobin. The hemoglobin, they can raise pigs with human hemoglobin, or hemoglobin that can move from the pig into human bodies, right? There's all kinds of interesting things happening in the world of genetics. We can manipulate the code of life. Bits, zeros and ones, fly across the world at the speed of light. Did you know that? When you send an email, it moves at the speed of light. Did you know right now, as we're sitting in this building, there's radio waves and web pages and emails flying through our body? This is the future, but it's here today. Atoms, the periodic table of elements. Using nanotechnology and nanotechniques, we can now manipulate things at the atomic scale. Essentially creating today things like stain-resistant pants, but maybe someday in the future, robotic red blood cells. Technology. The future is here. Would you say that that's a pretty good look at Kurzweil's rate of science and technology progress, that you can relate and that that's very real and that we can touch that today? Well, let's talk about emerging technopoly. Essentially what we did was we were looking, and we're known for this, okay? The research came out of IC Square Institute, which has been around studying this technopolis phenomena founded by Dr. George Kosmetsky some 30 years ago. I was tasked, along with a research team led by Dr. Eliza Evans from the University of Texas at Austin, to identify the emerging technopoly of the world. Who are the next Silicon Valleys, and what is their model of economic and technology development? The first criteria was what Lucia said earlier. communities and regions that unified economic development, workforce, 3 E's, I'm losing them, workforce, education, and economic development. So the 3 E's were employment, education, and economic development. I usually say workforce, education, economic development. So communities that were intersecting these three sort of government structures with industry, because employment and workforce can kind of be government or industry, essentially in public-private partnership were one of the key criteria. The second criteria was that essentially we were looking at regional economic development as opposed to being provincial and saying, well, this is about our city, or this is about some particular line that's been drawn on a map. So these economic development regions built their own regions, regardless of the predetermined lines that we would draw politically or otherwise. The next criteria is that the regions were focused on the intersection of science, technology, engineering, and the arts. You were selected because you are, as Judd said earlier, a community focused on not only STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, but teams, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. The next criteria is that you had a region focused on moving your intellectual property from your government and defense research laboratories and from your universities into the commercial marketplace. I have to tell you, in the United States, there is no model that we could identify that's been more effective than Randy Barrage's technology corridor policies and strategies related to moving intellectual property from the university into the marketplace. Universities nationwide are struggling with how they move intellectual property created by students and faculty into the marketplace. You guys have figured it out. You trap the intellectual property in about a 300-mile range. At the time we looked at this, about 90% of the IP licensing agreements were like, $10,000 to $30,000. They were affordable to small startup companies to create wealth. You see, trapping the intellectual property in the region is about creating wealth in the region. It's about creating jobs in the region. It's about innovation. If you don't let the IP out, you can't create wealth. The other thing, and this struck me at the TechPath meeting yesterday, Judd, is that many metropolitan service areas or cities or even states become very provincial. They become, this is my geography, this is my, this is mine. Everybody stay out. And we tend to forget that we're Americans competing against other countries and we should be working together. And one of the things that I think is really, really incredible is this 20-county region in I-4 and how essentially the workforce boards will talk about working with community colleges to stand up educational programs, 50 miles from here, 100 miles from here, and to put people into your workforce here in Orlando. Most workforce boards in the United States and community and technical colleges interpret their mission as creating local jobs, right? Let me give you an example. I live in San Antonio, Texas. An hour down the road is Austin, Texas. We cannot create a video game program in our community and technical colleges in order to feed the workforce supply in Austin, because we interpret our mission with this sort of lines that say it's about producing people to work in our economy. But that's not true. You've interpreted your mission in a very different way. And it's that regional focus, that regional cooperation, that regional collaboration which sets up a model in Florida for the United States and the world and puts you in the possible position of attaining economic development and wealth creation on the order of magnitude of places like Austin, Texas, Silicon Valley, and Research Triangle. So here's what some of the other countries look like. Remember, these countries have things in common with you. Okay, so your peers internationally are Finland. Finland has built a national network. Now, this is a country, but a relatively small country with about 10 million people. And they built a national network And they have these sort of regions that have specialized in these different kinds of technology. But what's that? They recognize the value of art and design for many, many different reasons. But one of the key reasons that we found in our research is they understand that art and design are connected to wealth creation in the form of branding. It's one thing to create invention. It's another thing to create a brand. Nokia from Finland. Another interesting part of Finland is they have a tremendous history of public-private partnership that goes back to the founding of their country. And these public-private partnerships that engage, for example, businesses, government, and the education and economic development world are really the key. Another thing about Finland, though, is they've done a pretty good job of getting their citizens through some form of college. But notice that if you're in Finland, you have two different tracks. Okay, you can go to a 3 to 4 year course in upper secondary school or a 2 to 5 year program in a vocational school. What? A 3 to 4 year course in a university or a 2 to 5 year program in a vocational school? Why would they send someone to a vocational school for 5 years? Because they realize that for every scientist and engineer, there's 2, 3, or 4 technicians backing up those engineers and scientists. We've missed this in America, but you haven't in Central Florida. You're building programs through TechPath that take a student from high school, allow them to take community and technical college programs, achieve up to 30 hours of credit, move into a community college or a technical center for another year of training, and then move into the university as a junior. It's huge. To quote Lucia, it's huge. It's really big. And the reason is, if you look at the history of career and technology education, essentially we stood up career and technology education in America formally in about 1917 as a response to the First World War. And the story is that essentially the Germans did a really good job of producing technicians to fuel their war engine. And so America responded by creating career and technical education, but we created a wedge. And it was that career and technical education and manual labor for one kind of student and general academics was for another kind of student. What you figured out in Florida is with all the technology, you can put it together and they're not necessarily different. Another interesting thing has happened, which is that the career and technical education programs were created to teach people through demonstration. And the idea was that there was a class of students who could not learn the same way as other students. And what's happened over time is that teaching through demonstration has proven in neuroscience to be a more effective way of teaching even general academics. So we have an educational revolution happening right now in Central Florida, which is attempting to unite career and technical education with general academics, but it's very difficult given some of the state policies on education, which cause us to shut down the career and technical education programs that we've worked so hard to build. Somehow we have to reach the legislature. I'm telling you, this ability to take a CTE program and line it up so you enter as a junior in college is your key differentiator in this state. Remember, Plato said, education is the key. And that pathway that you've created is your differentiator in the world. If somehow it gets knocked out of the air because people at the legislature don't get it, it will really be a sad thing. I mean, you have enough issues on the plate today with the deficit and the tax cuts, and just yesterday people didn't show up to our program because they were facing, one school dropped 20 teachers out yesterday. So you've got to do more with less. How do you do more with less? You integrate. Seoul, South Korea, in the country of Korea, an average of 1.2 computers per citizen. This is a technology economy in transition at its best, moving from a manufacturing economy to an innovation economy, known in the past for doing things like packaging the electronics and manufacturing things like washing machines and dryers and doing everybody's sort of secondhand work. Now South Korea is beginning to create new technology and focus on innovation. They see it as a social transformation, not just a technical transformation. They're building cities. This is a model of a digital media city currently under construction in Seoul, South Korea. The world is now building mega cities so that their young people don't have to leave to come to America for an education and then go back home because their economies are now booming, so that they can retain their technical talent, very similar to the way that Randy Barrage's program and the Corridor Council's program works to retain its students who graduate. You know, they may come in from all over the country or world, but these new incentives that Randy's building is keeping them here. It's a retention program. San Diego County. The possibility is a corridor like I-4 from San Diego to LA, but it's cut off by sort of social differences and politics, so San Diego County stands on its own. And San Diego County was a real key for me in this analysis. I was told by someone, well, just go look at what Cal IT is doing and let's do that here. And what Cal IT was doing is they had created an information technology and telecommunications research and development program during the sort of dot-com era, 1995 to 2000. And it was really funny because I looked at what they were doing and I read about a project where they were working with nanoscientists to build an OLED-based giant wall display where scientists could do scientific visualization and look at microscopy. They could look through scanning electron microscopes and things like that on a giant video wall. And they had brought the artists in to help interpret how people actually perceive things. And I thought, nanoscientists, engineers, telecommunications, video display, software, artist. This is where I keyed into it. I didn't know you guys existed yet. And I said, you know, that's the model. Everybody's talking about nanotechnology, biotechnology, information technology, and neuroscience. But what if you mix the arts into that? By the time we finished the research study, Cal IT 2 was launched. The first one was actually called Cal IT. They launched Cal IT 2 and proclaimed the integration of arts with this heavy science, engineering, and technology. I think we had nailed it. The next generation technopoly, the next generation wealth-building high-tech economies would be based on the ability to create a balance, as Lucia said, between right brain and left brain. The Washington, D.C. metropolitan service area is also another region. And if you think about the U.S. regions we picked, D.C., MSA, Central Florida, and San Diego, they also have something else in common. All of them are the key centers of innovation for modeling and simulation. Florida, Central Florida, the I-4 corridor, 20 counties linked together, cooperating to build and create innovation. The last thing that was a criteria was that these economies had used a cluster-based economic development approach. You guys know what cluster-based economic development is? If you have an industry in modeling and simulation, what you do is say, you think, let's say, oh, modeling and simulation in Central Florida. And then what you do is you say, okay, well, what does that mean? Oh, well, video game companies use modeling and simulation, so they're part of that too. Okay? And both of those depend on 3D animation, graphics design. Well, those go in there too. And, well, those same tools we use to make movies and this, you know, CGI in movies and the animation of video games, well, we use that in architecture. Those go in there too. We use this in industrial design. That goes in there too. We use this in engineering. That goes in there too. And now, once you have that, you say, okay, who are all the suppliers to these guys? Those go in too. Now, here is the key. Not only is Central Florida and these other regions doing cluster-based economic development strategy, but Randy Barrage has figured it out. You take the key clusters, information technology, modeling, simulation, and training, microelectronics, optics and photonics, aviation and aerospace, and medical technologies, and you figure out how they cut across each other. you figure out that modeling and simulation cuts across all of them. So why is a modeling, simulation, and arts program important for TechPath? It cuts across every other segment that they're building education programs for. Why is modeling, simulation, and the arts important to TechPath and regional development or the state's economic development? Integration of art and science, key to innovation. You see it? You're doing it. Sometimes you may feel like it's hard. Sometimes you may feel like you're not getting it done. But I'm an outsider and I can see it. And I travel all over the world and all over the United States. And I'll tell you that no one else in the country, in the United States, that I have visited has more potential than this region in the integration of science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and the arts in order to accelerate the development of human capital. Economic development and innovation are about human capital. Technology is thinking. And you actually get it to the point that you promote it. If you look at your economic development ads for the region, putting imagination to work. What's that? It's a Coast Guard clipper. Why would that be in there with like Spider-Man? Because you're saying that your arts and your imagination and your creativity can be used in applications other than entertainment. And this is why we selected the Central Florida Corridor as an emerging technopolis. Okay, I have a little bit of time left, and I know you guys are, probably short on time. I can stop, or I can do the rest relatively quickly, in 15 minutes. You want to stop or you want to go? Okay, give me 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, 15. 5, 10, 15. Okay, jobs. So what's happening in jobs is really interesting. Now I'm going to stretch your brain a bit, and I should have more on here on media and film entertainment jobs. I have a study. I do studies on emerging technologies and their implications for the workforce, and they're free. And I wrote one on the video game industry and actually sort of foresaw the whole serious games thing happening. And these reports have the jobs, the wages, the entry-level jobs, the whole thing. So in Texas, okay, one of the things I do is when I go into a community to try and help the community align, I'll go spend a week or 10 days in a community, and I go to the employers. And the key is to go, you drive by these buildings all the time, right? There's sort of these low buildings, these high-tech buildings. But unless you go inside, you have no idea what's really happening. So I go and I visit. I'm going for education, but I go to the employers. And I listen to the stories. And this example is, I hear it 3 times a day when I'm on my tours. And it is, get some context. You're in West Texas. Okay, put on your cowboy boots and your cowboy hat. This is rattlesnake capital of the United States. It's out in the middle of nowhere. Okay? And this is Harley Hall. He's at American Eagle in the service depot, and what you see here is one of those small jets from American Eagle, and they're pulling it apart. Every 5,000 flight hours, they completely pull them apart and rebuild them. And he says, McDonald's gets 40 applicants for every job, and I get 1 applicant for every 40 jobs, and he takes me over and shows me the bulletin board of job postings. He says, I don't get it. I pay $30,000 a year to start. Now remember, you're in the rattlesnake capital of the world. That job in Houston or Dallas starts at $40,000 to $50,000. So someone who goes through a high school program and then to a technical center and gets the FAA certification to work on airplanes in Orlando probably starts between $30,000 and $45,000 a year. Here's where it is. Now let's see if you guys got it. Oops, I'm giving it away. Go. Okay. Okay, 20% of the pie, 20% of the pie, 60% of the pie. Which one of these? There's 3 categories. A professional job, which requires a university degree. A skilled job, which requires high school graduation plus 2 years of college or on-the-job training. Or an unskilled job, which requires basically no training. Which of these is the skilled job, the one that requires high school education plus 2 years of training? How many of you think it's someone said 60. Who thinks it's the 60%? Who thinks it's one of the other two? 60% got it. Today, 65% of the jobs require the equivalent, notice equivalent, of a high school degree plus 2 years of on-the-job training. Do you think that our baby boomers that didn't graduate from high school but have been on the job 20 years might have picked up the equivalent of a high school degree plus 2 years of technical training? That explains that. Today, according to the Department of Labor, 65% of the jobs are skilled jobs, requiring the equivalent of a high school degree and 2 years of post-secondary education. Remember what I said earlier? 40% of baby boomers are going to walk off the job or significantly restructure their work patterns by 2015. Imagine now that 40% of this pie disappears by 2015. Where is the middle class? Is the middle class predominantly here, here, here? Hello. You want to know the greatest threat to the American middle class? Kids not ready to go into those jobs. Now, let's take it a little bit further. If you're a baby boomer, expected to live longer than previous generations, particularly women, concerned about your health and the fact that you may retire to an elderly home or a long-term care facility, who will take care of you? Skilled workers. Next time you get on an airplane, look out the window. Skilled workers. If we don't make the right decisions today, before we walk off the job or significantly alter our work patterns, who's going to take care of us? Better yet, who's going to pay our Social Security if you're a baby boomer? Who's going to pay your Medicare? If you don't make the right decision about encouraging kids to go this technical route, this workforce route, this vocational route, this bad word route, there's no middle class. There's no Social Security. There's no Medicare. We got to figure it out. Do you know our high schools today largely do not tell students about the technical college and workforce path? They're gearing every student to go to the university. Now let's do this again. How many people have received a university degree? What percentage of people have received a university degree consistent from 1950 to 2004? 1 in 5 Americans. Our education system has been built for the industrial system. We live in a post-information age. Not a post-industrial age, we live in a post-information age. There's something entirely new popping up. When we create pigs with human ears growing on their back, that's about a little bit more than industrialization, wouldn't you say, or information technology? Okay? So the point is, when you've heard that, we've created our high schools are out of date, they create people for factories. Well, what does that mean? You've ever heard of the bell curve? What a bell curve does is say if you're over here, you're a manager. If you're over here, you're unskilled labor. That system doesn't make sense anymore. 65% is now the bulk of the jobs. Highly technical jobs. Let me show you what they look like. Technical jobs are growing 5 times faster than other jobs. In Texas, last year, if you take students who graduated with an AAS, an associate's degree from a community or technical college, and students who graduated with a bachelor's degree, and you average their salaries for year 1, 5 of the top 8 paying positions were AAS degrees. Did you know that people in the construction industry average $40,000 a year in Texas their first year out of college? Why are we shutting down the construction programs? Healthcare, the demand for people in health professions, clinical sciences, or what's called allied health, is out of the ballpark. It's one of the fastest growing job segments in our country because of baby boomers. You're getting older. You need someone to take care of you. But yet we won't send our students off to the vocational pathway or open that pathway up for some reason. We've got to get over it. We've got to make decisions for ourselves and for future generations. Here's the target of opportunity. The target of opportunity is that as computers have moved into what have been blue-collar jobs, we create a new class of jobs that I'll refer to as a gold-collar job. This is essentially the mechanic that works on the car that now has to use a computer to diagnose the problems in the car. Or the nurse that has to use all the biomedical equipment, hook it up, read the charts, do case-based research, best practices, manage inventories using RFID and networks. The guy who works on the airplanes, now mechanic and computer technician. It's called a gold-collar job. That's the target of opportunity. Down in the valley, right next to Mexico and Texas, the guys that drive the bucket trucks for AT&T, you know what a bucket truck is? These guys start out at $32,000 to $44,000 a year, but I had this guy crack the books open, and Nat said, look, the least I paid anybody last year was $69,000 a year. I said, you mean to tell me down in the valley where the wages are really repressed, if I work for AT&T, I'm going to make at least $69,000 a year driving a bucket truck? He said, well, that's not all. Average wage was $85,000. The most I paid somebody was $120,000. Does that sound like a livable wage? Well, that's a technical degree. That's not a university degree. In fact, the kids that come in, many of them with computer science degrees, don't get hired. They're sent back to the technical college to get some skill to go with their knowledge. This is a chemistry technician. In Texas, they start out at about $35,000 a year, but most of them make $60,000 to $70,000 a year. When I visited the technical college, the entire class had at least one job offer 6 months prior to graduation. Most of them had 2 or 3, and many of them had offers to pay off all of their college debt before they started. That's called a vocational education. Auto collision. I love this example. You know the old paint and body shop stuff in high school? Well, they do this. You may do it at your technical centers, right? Paint and body shop. The insurance companies have figured out that they're losing billions of dollars a year by having people do estimates for repairs who know nothing about the repairs. So now they go to the auto collision shops, hire the kids out who know how to do the Bondo and the paint, and they start at $42,000 a year plus home, auto, health, and life insurance plus a car. See it? Knowledge and skill. Gold-collar job. Here's another one. This is United Launch Alliance. In Harlingen, Texas, they build the cones on these rockets. These guys start at $43,000 to $57,000 a year in what is basically a community right up next to Mexico with the lowest wages in Texas. So one of the things that we need to focus on when we talk about information technology programs is essentially the combination of computers and machines. And I'll call that mechatronics, or a loose translation would be robotics. It's not a robot in the sense of a walking, talking robot, or even a robot like out here, but what makes robot is sensor, actuator, motor, computer, and software. If you have that combination, you have a robotic system. Every system on a car is monitored, controlled by a computer. Technicians have to be more analytical and process-oriented. I hear this all the time, not only in auto shops, but in manufacturing facilities. They say the guys used to be able to go over and put their hand on the machine and feel the vibration and diagnose the problem or listen to it. It doesn't work anymore. You have to troubleshoot through a computer, so it sets up a different kind of thinking, a different kind of problem solving. Diesel technicians, people who come out of our diesel program in San Antonio, Texas, actually, let me give you an exemplar. A student a year ago, the best student in the diesel class, started first day out of a 2-year technical degree program in diesel, $96,000 a year. In Kilgore, Texas, in East Texas, the top student started at $74,000 a year. Now understand that I give this speech all the time, and most of the K-12 teachers are kind of sitting there going, wow, 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 and a lot of them come up to me afterwards and say, where did I go do that? I mean, these are real jobs. These jobs break cycles of poverty. And the wages in the video game and media and television industry get to these levels and higher with demonstrated skill. Because you're a craft and artisan community, you're very much an apprentice kind of, you work up through demonstration. Wind energy, if you have wind turbines in Florida, it's the same thing. Now let me shift, okay? What they're telling us is we need people who can do machines, mechanical stuff, and computer stuff. Well, in the case of wind energy, you have to be able to scale 160 feet in the air with a 40-pound tool belt with nothing but a rope in case you fall. You have to know high voltage electricity so you don't get vaporized. You have to know how to repair the machine, how to troubleshoot the instrumentation and computer technology, and you have to know about airfoils and composites. So we can say that there's a trend, not all jobs, but we can identify a segment of jobs, and this is true in the video game design, and I'm sure in television and other media production, but particularly in video game, where instead of highly specialized skill, now what we seek are people who are multi-skilled. And we found this in the video game industry in particular. And it is essentially a movement from specialization to systems. Now notice I didn't say specialization to generalization. Specialization would indicate narrow and deep. Systems, or let's say generalization, okay, I didn't say generalized skill, but let's look at generalization. Generalized skill would be broad and shallow, right? Broad and shallow. System skills are broad, deep, and they're interconnected. We ran across this in 2004. 100 million jobs are going to be created at the intersection of traditional academic disciplines or jobs. And Michael Bettersworth and I at TSTC looked at each other and we said, you know, all these reports we're writing, it's already here. So this trend toward multi-skill systems thinkers and doers is one of the real keys to understanding what kind of education programs to invest in and what kind of thinking to create in the student population. It's true in oil and gas and refineries, it's true in manufacturing, and it's true in biotechnology and nanotechnology. What enables the production of pharmaceuticals are essentially computers and machines combined together to cook up the ingredients. The same thing is true in nanotechnology, although you might be working with dry or wet substances. Research and development. This region is heavily focused on research and development for the Mars mission with NASA, to support the warfighter in Iraq, to support homeland security, to support next generation video game technologies, to support marine technologies, medical devices. And a real key is producing research and development technicians that work with the scientists and the engineers. What you're looking at here is the Casper Astrophysics Nano Research Laboratory at Baylor University in Waco, Texas. It's housed at the technical college. This is a technical college student who upon graduation was hired to start at $50,000 a year. When the scientists and the PhDs come over to run their experiments on, like, you know, the structure of the universe type stuff, they're told, don't touch the equipment. It's his job. Millions of dollars worth of equipment. Machining, $36,000 to $37,000 a year, many of them making $60,000 a year, and in the machining, the computer numerically controlled machines and the injection molding that produce things like this in the cell phone now require people that essentially are very high skill operators, and so they're paid very well. So operators, this is a GM train. This is what a modern train looks like. There's no boop, boop, it's boop, boop. It's all computerized. Operators, from unskilled operators to high-skilled operators. When you go into the machining environment, you always see pencil and paper, laptop, and CNC machine. Hard hats and laptops, okay? Blue-collar skill, white-collar knowledge, gold-collar, medium to high, medium or high paying jobs. This is an operator controlling a combined heat and power plant. It looks like this. Technical college graduate. This is actually an intelligent vehicle highway system. It looks like NASA, but this is a control platform for our vehicles. We have these for air, land, sea, space, and cyberspace. Technicians, UAVs, robots on the battlefield, undersea robotics, and robots on Mars. All require high skill technicians and operators. Finally, let me talk about education. I gave you the Sputnik. This is our Sputnik, the intersection of globalization, science and technology, and demography. But let me show you what's happening. And it's funny, because most communities I show this to, I can't do this way. I have a different graphic. If you think of the black area as the Sputnik, the gray area is our employers. And remember that employers aren't just the industry, but the military and government and civil society, as well as industry. And we have a relationship today between K-12 and universities. This greater overlap between universities and K-12 compared to, say, your technical centers represents that the mandate today is essentially that every student's on track to a university degree. That's how our curriculum and that's how these tests are geared. How many people have gotten university degrees since 1950? 1 in 5. What happens to the rest of those? They work at McDonald's, some of them are in jail, and there's the rest of us. Okay, so I sort of did this on purpose. This overlap is the influence they have on K-12. And the overlap between the workforce, technical, community college programs and technical workforce programs is minimal in K-12, really compared to this influence of the universities, and it generally only overlaps where it's community college general academics that transfer into the university. Now, what I show most people is that the strategy is to move the community and technical college deeper into K-12. But with what you're doing in the 2+2 programs and the technical articulated programs that move kids in as a junior gives you the strategic advantage because you have a greater integration between not only K-12 and the community college, but K-12 and the university. You have a system, a seamless system. That's your key. Don't let anybody take it away. Tech Pass 2+2 programs. You're a model for the state. If you can't fund more 2+2 programs, turn the 2+2 programs you have into products and sell them nationally and internationally and take the money and put it back into new programs for you. You just need a business model. Da Vinci Minds. How do you do that? Well, in the video game industry, kids who are hacking and modifying games exhibit the integration of science, technology, engineering, math, and the arts. We said it earlier, teams, technology, engineering, arts, math, and science. It's your differentiator. Accentuate it a little more. You have a new M&S program coming up in TechPath. My concern is that there's not enough focus on the arts. If you have to create a technical arts program next. So how do you do it? How many of you are teachers here today? How many of you are career and technical education teachers? Okay? The answer is, oh, I got something else here. The answer is that career and technical education represents the intersection of a specific context with the application of a particular skill with theoretical knowledge. So what differentiates CTE or vocational education is we're not just dealing with the theory or knowledge. That's what we do in general academics. We're devoid of context or application. Neuroscience tells us the more senses we engage, the more we situate learning in specific context and application, the greater the retention and recall. The answer is the history of career and technical education, the pedagogy developed in rigorous career and technical education is the method, and you already have it embedded in your schools. Just accentuate it a little bit. So how do you marry teams, STEM plus the arts? In Texas, we've been experimenting with game camps. And the idea is essentially we get kids around the table for 2 weeks during the summer and they build video games. And we do it as an in-residence program. And they eat a lot of pizza. And they play a lot of video games. But they build them. And one of the biggest impacts of our program has been to draw kids out that parents have a great concern about because of the amount of time they spend playing games. And there is a point which is too much gameplay. And if you can reach these kids that are just these tremendous strategic game players, they're just obsessed with it, and break through from player, from consumer to builder, you've got something. And if you take the game camp and you say, okay, let's build a game, but let Jim come in and do the lecture on serious games, or the guy here earlier was talking about serious games, and show you all the different things you can do with video games, what do the kids do? We did it in Texas. We said, one year, we said, what do you guys want to build? We want to get our driver's license. We want to build a program that lets us drive a car and essentially drive through the test so that we're ready, because we can't drive the car yet. Parents won't let us drive the car. You remember that? So these kids built a video game where they could take their driver's test in a video game. That's the key. If you can connect this teams thing to not just entertainment and education, which is important, but also to these other kinds of opportunities, we can explode the field. Expand Tech Path to include arts and innovation as a focus. Da Vinci Minds. Here it is. How do you do it? Context, theory, and applied learning. CTE, rich, robust, rigorous CTE, the pedagogy that you have, is the model. Am I the only one who says this? No. Bill Daggett did a study of the top 25 performing high schools in America. He says that the model is our top 25 schools are on the green dot. When you come into one of these high schools, there's no option. CTE is for every student. The arts are for every student, and general academics is for every student. This is the model. Now, if you rip CTE out of your schools, how are you going to compete? Because Texas and Texas and California and New York are all moving in this direction. Governor Schwarzenegger announced that the education reform in California would be to embrace career and technical education as the basis of transforming the K-12 experience and the opportunities for students who come through the process. The mayor of New York, Mayor Bloomberg, has announced CTE is the basis of our educational reform. We will change our educational system by developing rigorous CTE programs that effectively unite CTE academics and the arts. This is what the high schools look like, and let me give you a hint about how you do it. In Harlingen, Texas, they built a courtroom, a law program, and you go into the law program if you want to be a lawyer, a civil servant, or a social worker, or a police officer in high school. They built a program for engineering, and they say, come here if you want to be an engineer. What's one step back from an engineer? Technician. That's how you do it. Everybody wants their kids to be doctors, lawyers, and accountants. So if you want to overcome the stigma associated with vocational education, you can build pathways like you are, 2+2, right, where someone takes criminal justice, then they move into a university with that background, maybe on a law track. What do the programs have in common? They are looking for students that get licenses and certifications, college credit through dual enrollment, up to 30 hours by high school graduation, and they connect academic excellence with CTE. CTE does not necessarily mean less rigorous. And the idea is to create knowledge and skills, foster knowledge and skills that will increase the earning potential of students and better prepare them for both post-secondary education and careers. Every student needs career preparation. How many of the students do you know of that have gone to the university with parents that just sort of bubble around them, you know, all the way through elementary and all the way through college and then the master's degree, and it's boop, and they go, I don't want to do that. And they land back at home. Pop the bubble. We live in a world that is at war. We live in a world where environmental degradation threatens the survivability of the human race. These are serious issues that kids are actually dealing with. When I give my speech, I can't tell you how many kids come up to me and say, man, I think about that nanotechnology all the time. Are the robots, nanorobots, going to take over the world? And then they say, I don't have anybody to talk to about it. They think I'm crazy. The world is changing, and kids live in an information glut. They live in a world of information overload. Can you feel it? Every year, more information, more information, more information. Information overload means less recall and retention. When students say, well, why do I have to learn that? Because I told you so doesn't work anymore. Because their genes are saying select, 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 select. You only have so much selection. So looking for what do I need to do? Why do I need to learn that is the teachable moment. And career and technical education's context and application answer why. Technical jobs, gold collar workers, key target. Connecting technical workforce education with the general academics so that they're united, they're integrated. You see, when you take one thing and you integrate it with another, you get something entirely new. It's not just two parts now. It truly is a case where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. What does it look like? Well, in aerospace, we go 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th grade. Aerospace classes. When you get to 10th grade, you can take any of these different aircraft, airframe, power plant, or avionics courses, and here it is. High school, community college, work. You got it? High school, community college, work. If you want to build CGI animators, advanced 3D visualization, you have to give the kids in school the same tool that the engineers and directors use. What about FCAT? Oh, what about FCAT? We can't do any of this because of FCAT, right? Do the research. Do the research. There's something called Tech Prep. It exists nationwide. Students in Tech Prep have united career and technical education with general academics. They're on a full load of, well, a full load is college courses, general academics courses, and CTE courses. What does the data say? On the standardized tests in Texas, we're looking at this in New York now, the Tech Prep students are the white pyramids. Well, they show up to school more often. Well, they graduate more often. Well, 9th grade, the green indicates that a greater percentage of them passed reading and math than everybody else. 10th grade, a greater percentage of them passed these tests than other people. Remember, learning science says when you connect theory, application, and context, you get a better result. 11th grade, the same thing is true with the exception of social studies and science, where they're equal in percentage passing rates. And here is the kicker. They matriculate to college at least 50% in Texas. 50% of these Tech Prep kids go to college. Now, there's some work that needs to be done on college completion and other things, okay, but they go to college. In the valley, near Mexico, but in Texas, 65% of the students, where the population is largely Hispanic and low income, go to college. The explosion in demography in America relative to the increasing numbers of Hispanics in America is either our greatest opportunity or our biggest problem, depending on how we play the cards. There's an opportunity in students and immigrants who come to America hungry. And in the Valley, they're embracing them. And they've helped their parents make the shift to understand that vocational education is not the old manual labor jobs where you get to go pick cotton instead of go to college. Rigorous CTE programs can also provide an early entry to work, like the CNA nursing programs where students go in 10th grade and they take care of patients and empty waistbands and clean linens. Well, those students tour once a month anywhere they want to go in the hospital. They get to go to oncology, they get to go to maternity, they get to go to surgery. And if you talk to the students, they say, well, next year I'll be a medical technician, I'll ride around on an ambulance and save lives. I plan to enter college and get a nursing degree and a bachelor's, and maybe someday get a master's and be an operating room nurse. The reality for many of these students is they will have to work while they go to school. Shouldn't they work in the careers in which they plan to graduate? How many people go to school for a degree and get out and say, I don't want to do that? What do I do with a sociology degree? Some of these kids in CTE are aligned. They're doing the drudgery so that they can get where they want to go. And that alignment is really the key. Informal feeder programs, this is Otronicon, you guys know about it. Robotics, you're doing the same thing. The program is Emerging Technopolis, Central Florida's high technology corridor. We talked about technology, emerging technopoly, jobs, and education. Beep, 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 beep. Can you hear it? What are you going to do about it? Thank you.